Just even in my life, I tried to just do everything the most efficient way possible.
Because the key now is like you've got to that level, and that's awesome. Let's keep you here.
In Counter-Strike, so many of the things are in the timing, right? Sometimes 1 second is way too much.
Because I feel like some of my persona in Counter-Strike changed who I was as a person.
Oh, what? Jumping double for
gold! Today I'm talking with Parla. He is a YouTube creator known as Mantrousse. I believe he has around 433,000 subscribers at the point of this recording. And he also has done a lot of talent work in the Counter-Strike Global Offensive community, going to lots of events over the last few years. Now, I talked to him about his life as a content creator and the ups and downs that follow, as well as his history with injuries and his passion for martial arts and fitness and more. You may have noticed I've been speaking not just with players or talent, but others whose expertise serves to push the envelope in our continually developing industry. This is the DDK Show. If you enjoy it, subscribe on YouTube, give it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, follow on Spotify, support on patreon.com/DDK Esports, or simply connect with me on Twitter at DDK Esports. If you leave a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Twitter, please consider mentioning ideas, people, or topics you find interesting. This is still a side project for me, and the positive support really helps. And now, here's my conversation with Parla. All right, thanks for coming and sitting down with me, Parla. It's awesome to actually record a podcast with you. And I think one of the reasons is because we have a pretty great rapport. We've known each other for a while, and we have some similar interests. So I'm excited for this.
Thanks, Dan. I'm looking forward to chatting. And that was a very nice introduction.
Yeah. All right. So you just been, you just effectively been out the martial arts gym, and
yeah, dude, I have.
Martial arts is something that's something I really loved growing up, and I had to kind of stop because of an injury, and I've kind of been thinking about getting back into it recently because I'm doing much better, like 10 years on. And you've been someone that you've had lots of injuries as well, and specifically with your back and everything, and you've just been getting back into martial arts. So what does that like kind of changed for you in terms of the way that you live your life and how you feel about yourself and everything?
Yeah. Firstly, Dan, if your shoulder's better and stuff, and your body is in the right space where you can start trying it again, you should as soon as you can. So you're in LA. There's lots of gyms, all different types of martial arts or mixed martial arts. You should find something that suits and give it a go, see how your body reacts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm thinking about the BJJ for sure.
Yeah, do it, mate. Do it. So yeah, you're right. I did martial arts as a kid. I did taekwondo with a bit of Muay Thai, ages like 7 to 12, roughly like 5.5 years. And I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was at university for 2.5 years, or like two and a bit years for my blue belt. And yeah, I had to stop at the end of 2012 because of a pretty serious back injury, like herniated disc in my back. That actually happened a long time before then, but it just didn't get better. I didn't rehab it. Eventually, I went to see someone at the end of 2012 that helped me a lot with the rehab plan, a guy called Stuart McGill. He's quite well known in sort of like athletic circles. And he gave me a great rehab plan that eventually got it under control. By the time it was under control, I was, full-time with YouTube and doing presenting stuff, and I just hadn't got around to getting back into martial arts or fitness because I also enjoyed and was regularly going to the gym. And then I think it was some point in 2017, I started going to the gym again, lifting some weights, and then there was that little voice in my head that was saying, "Oh yeah, try martial arts again. See if you can train safely this time." And it was the start of 2019 where I started actually going to classes again here. Well, no, a bit before, like in London, like a tiny, like here and there, very irregularly. I think I did my first one back, at the end of 2017 or the end of 2016 at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in London. But eventually started regularly committing to it at the start of 2019. And since then, I've been doing, I guess, mixed martial arts, Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, both of them together. And I've been going to the gym regularly since the start of 2018. And it's a big change, man. It's nice to be able to do it again and know I can do it safely. it was a big part of my identity when I was at university in terms of personal identity. Like I really liked going to jiu-jitsu, doing it. And when I stopped being able to do it, it was a big shock and sort of adjustment. And being able to start doing it again and do it safely, it's been, yeah, dude, it's awesome. Obviously, there are days like today where you go and you come out feeling, like, oh, that was tough. But overall, dude, it's so nice to be able to do it again and add it to my sort of, I don't know, like weekly activities that I do along with everything else. And so it's always something that I've championed, like doing martial arts as well as video games and other things. And so for me, it's very rewarding to be able to do it again and do it safely. If that answers your question, man, I think you kind of asked me, like, what's it like to start doing it again, basically. And I guess that's kind of an overall view of it. It's very nice it's very enjoyable to be able to do it again and start building those skills because they feed into other parts of your life as well, very much, martial arts.
I think you touched on a really interesting part of it too, with how you mentioned like your identity, like very much, it was the case that you identified with it. And I think that's one of whenever you get injured, there's this it's so hugely disruptive to your life and what you identify with. And from, like, let's say, a mental health perspective, it's a challenge to, I found, especially to try to fill that void with something that you find is equally fulfilling, because you got into that thing in the first place because it just kind of makes sense for who you are, who you want to be. So trying to reinvent yourself is really tricky, and I think it can be difficult. I think sometimes you can never quite fill the void in the same way. And so it's like, what was your experience with that when you were injured and you didn't have the martial arts? Like, what were the things you're trying to do to get that fulfillment that you got from it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I know we've spoken about this before, so I know what you're leading me to answer about. But just quickly as well, for people that might not know, Dan definitely personally relates to this, because when he originally injured his shoulder, that's like the main injury that you've had throughout your life, right? Is your shoulder.
Yeah, I fucked them both up.
Yeah, well, what happened with Dan is that you used to be a relatively competitive gymnast, right? And so I know that must have been very disruptive for you. So you definitely can understand what I'm talking about, right?
I wouldn't say that I was like serious, but I was.
But you were going to a club, dude, and you were training regularly and stuff. Like, it was a big part of your life.
Exactly, yeah. And I was doing a lot of martial arts and a lot of running, a lot of lifting. I was just doing a lot of really intense physical stuff, which was all, I was robbed.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that's kind of how I felt, dude. Like, I felt like I'd sort of robbed myself, or fate had robbed me of I was never thinking of being like a full-time jiu-jitsu fighter. I was like a decent blue belt who'd got his blue belt relatively recently. I just enjoyed doing it, but I did it very regularly. I was doing it maybe 4 times a week or something, a bit more with gym, etc. That's not a person called Jim, by the way. I mean going to the gym. And suddenly having to stop doing that. For complete clarity, what happened with me, I was in one class, and like I had said, my back had been an issue for a long time. And suddenly I was in one class and I just had a massive relapse, like so much pain. I couldn't even ride my bike home from the gym that I was training at, which I'd ridden my bike to. And like I couldn't do anything. I at that point, after I'd sort of injured it, had a big relapse, I could only do rehab. So I was completely stuck for what I could do in my spare time. Don't get me wrong, I was still playing video games and stuff. But this was in 2012, so this was pre all my other work. It was just after university. I wasn't employed yet, so essentially I had nothing. Like, what I was filling my time with was jiu-jitsu in the gym whilst looking for work. And so then eventually I had nothing at that point. And at that point, like when I had nothing in front of me, an idea popped back into my head to try YouTube, which is something that me and my friends had toyed with in 2006, 2007, and just never got round to. And that's what I ended up filling my time with. Eventually I did get work at the start of 2013, but for like 6 to 8 months I was unemployed. And at the very end of 2012, I was like, and this was post the injury, as I started rehabbing it while still looking for jobs, that idea of trying YouTube popped into my head. And so I started making videos.
So just to add some additional clarity for those who don't understand, I don't think we actually covered it properly, was, what was like the the specific? Do you have any more specifics behind the actual cause of the injury? So you had this herniation, but do you know like what led to it or?
Yeah. So the funny thing with disc injuries, unless you have like a very specific traumatic event, let's say like a car crash or a massive fall, etc., where you can 100% see the underlying cause. And again, guys, take everything I say with a pinch of salt, but I'm relatively educated on it. But nonetheless, I'm not a doctor. I'm not Stuart McGill or any other well-known athletic back rehab person, but I've tried to educate myself on it over the years and continue to do so because it's part of my life. But as far as I know, unless you have a specific moment like that you can clearly point to and say, oh yeah, it was excess force going through it because I crashed in a car, I fell off my bike, whatever. It's usually to do with your back over time, repeating motions that, because you have a back like the one you do, it can't really put up with them. And eventually the disc kind of gets worn down to the point where one of the bits might herniate. And a herniation is where the sort of viscous gel in the middle, which is what's responsible for sort of the suspension in your back, pokes out of the sort of harder bit around it that keeps it inside and then touches a nerve. And so for me, what my theory is that my whole life I used to twist and click my back like throughout my childhood and teens. And then one day in 2009, I was doing that on my bed and I kind of kept going, twisting. And then I had like a little sharp pinch, not too bad, but then the pain from that stayed. That was probably the initial herniation, which was caused from many years of doing that twisting motion, which for some people, their backs can take that. You might have the genetics that allow that. But for me, either from doing it too much or from having a combination of that and a back that can't really take that sort of strain, I caused a little herniation in my back. L5-S1 is the disc that I have herniated. And I was also doing a lot of things at the time that weren't really good for the back, like doing lots of sit-ups and crunches, not necessarily great exercises for the core, but definitely not good for the spine, like repetitive bending motions and twisting motions if you're doing like twisting sit-ups and stuff. And then obviously I started going to the gym. When you start at the gym, you might not know the best form for all the exercises. I definitely didn't. So I was definitely aggravating things. And if you do something like jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and you're throwing, you're having pressure on your body, you're rounding your back and overly extending your back in different ways. If you have a back that's not got a great capacity for those sorts of movements or a pre-existing injury in your back, the injury will either stay or get worse. It's unlikely to get better, right? And eventually it was getting like steadily harder to control, and sometimes it would feel better. And then at the end of 2012, I had a big relapse. And I would imagine it was just the original disc just had taken too much damage and the herniation grew larger, if that answers your question. So for me, it's like a passage of things over time, not one traumatic event.
It is kind of insane, like how the different people's bodies react differently to things. Because I've been the PT that I've been seeing is also like a back specialist, and he works with elite athletes, so he's really top tier. I got a recommendation from Taylor Johnson actually, so shout outs to Taylor Johnson,
Taylor,
who's been on the podcast a couple of times. Those of you that are regular listeners, but I was describing one event I had actually with my back from a deadlifting session where I had sciatica for like 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, and just a lot of shooting pains. So I was describing just everything that had happened, and he's like, yeah, you herniated your disc, but you're like one of the people where it just healed and you're fine. And then meanwhile, my girlfriend, who had a bunch of different things, like she was a polo player and she had like horses falling on her, and she was in a car. She'd been bumped by some cars and stuff and had some issues with that, and she had a really severe situation with her herniation where her body didn't heal it properly, and it led to all sorts of very severe outcomes in that sense. So it's just so crazy how different our bodies are. But
yeah, I think it's, I don't know if it's a common misconception or just something that a lot of people don't realize, is that the differences between bodies and how you have to train around the type of body that you have. Obviously, you can start things off at like a generic level in terms of your training, but there should come a point where you have to start doing things around how you were born, right? How your body developed over time, and backs definitely fall into that category. Some people have more of a lumbar curve, so a curve in their lower spine than others. Some have more of a curve in the top of their spine, thoracic spinal. Sometimes I can't pronounce that word, but you get my point, right? Is that all these things affect how you train and like the capacity your discs have for pressure going through them. And yeah, usually you have to adjust how you do things over time if you start feeling bits of pain or whatever, or you know, if you're feeling certain things, oftentimes you need to kind of adjust things based around how your body is or the symptoms that you're getting.
Are you in any way like particular about, let's say, the chairs that you're going to be using for gaming and stuff?
No, so that's something that I find quite interesting and also funny, is that I see a lot of people online talking about game for extended periods, but essentially what we're talking about is sitting for extended periods, right? And don't get me wrong, you can have really bad chairs and you can have good chairs. Like a really bad, cheap chair, like a plastic fold-out WWE chair that's made for smashing off people's backs, or like a Herman Miller or something. And of course, these things will make a difference. But ultimately, what makes a difference for sitting for extended periods is knowing like the right way to sit, and also to get up from sitting at periods and things like this. There's a lot that goes into it. You can't just buy a very good chair and expect not to have any pain in your back. That's just not the way, or your shoulders or your wrist or whatever. There's many things that go into this, like the angles of your knees, your connection with your feet on the floor, your hips, the posture of your spine, how you're looking at the screen. All these things factor into it. You can't just get a sick chair that costs $1,000, $2,000 or euros and expect not to have any pain. There's a lot of things that go into this. So guys, anyone listening, think about that before you spend a bunch of money on an expensive chair. There's probably many things you can do if you're getting symptoms in your body from pain, from sitting or playing games, beyond just buying an expensive chair.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'd love a Herman Miller. Yo, Herman Miller, sponsor people. If you're lit out there, send me one. But no, for me, Dan, I was going to call you James for a second. Dan, for me, the main thing, generally, I have pretty good posture sitting. I know that a good ways to sit for my body on most things. But for me, like my herniation is in my lumbar spine, and so for me, it's about having a lower back cushion. Or if I don't have access to a lower back cushion, like stuffing like a jumper rolled up behind my lower back, or if I'm sitting on a sofa, putting a little pillow behind my lumbar spine and making sure that I get up and change my posture. And again, sure, I'm going on a rant right now, but the whole concept of getting up to move and stuff, just to explain a bit why that is. So essentially, if you're sitting, actually, let me start again from a phrase that I got told once. It's a good phrase. It's slightly dramatic, but it's a good phrase to know and to take with a pinch of salt. Sitting is like having a car crash at 0 miles per hour. And some people say that because the damage that you can do to your body by sitting for extended periods and in the wrong way can actually be pretty damn bad. Right? So if you take that with a pinch of salt, but keep it in mind, and then look into it in a bit more detail. So at least with regards to the spine. So when you sit for extended periods, right, and that you don't change your posture, you don't move, and you're maybe not in an optimal position, the forces going through your spine will be going through the same points in your spine for quite a long time. And that means the discs, they will be receiving like force going through them in the same point, which causes that little bit to get a bit weaker, and thus potentially causing more chance for like a herniation or something like that. So for one of the reasons why you might get told to change your posture and to get up and move every like 15, 20 minutes, just for like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, is to stop that process of the same amount of force going through the same point that can potentially cause or lead to injury. It's so that you stop putting like the same amount of force through the same points in your body. It's not just like, oh, get up and move. It removes the pain. That's kind of like, as far as I know, one of the important bits about why you change your posture and get up and move. And it's a good thing to know, like a small bit of the science behind it. Again, Dan, I'm not a scientist, but these are some of the things I've learned over time. I'm trying my best to sort of describe it now. So apologies if that comes across a bit mashed up or a bad explanation, but hopefully you guys get what I mean.
Oh, for sure. And shout out to anyone else who also became suddenly very aware of like every vertebrae in their back and how they were sitting and like started moving around.
Well,
Whilst you were talking about that, about sitting positions.
Yeah, you mean your girlfriend, Dan? Yeah.
Oh no, I was just saying that like when you were describing everything about sitting and the posture and your back and everything, I started to like feel everything in my back and I started to get really antsy, like became really conscious suddenly in my back.
Dude, to give a bit more context as well, like after I relapsed my back at the end of 2012 and I went to see Stu in Canada, get a rehab plan. Like from that period on, I had to change like every habit in my body that can potentially affect my back. Don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect all the time, but things that the average person doesn't have to think about, like for instance, how you walk, how you go upstairs, how you pick something up off the floor, how you sit, how you train, like all these things like that might not be clear to someone just watching me going through my daily life, but all of those things, if you mess your back up, like they're things that you have to start considering if you want to stop having so much pain in your back.
It is something like you're talking about the chairs and stuff, and I think there's that's where we started on this point, right? To do chairs. Yeah, I just wanted to like add something to that because I'm usually quite vocal about chairs and so on. And I think we live in like a dangerous world in the sense that it's quite easy to be misled by marketing.
Yeah, for sure.
And while there might not be any like blatant lies, you just may be led to believe things that may not be true. And so, for example, if I always use the example in terms of whenever you're assessing like how like what is the quality of a product. So let's say we're talking about like headphones. Which company are you going to put your trust into first? Are you going to put your trust into a company that is a gaming company that makes all kinds of different peripherals and sources that the production and design of those to different other companies perhaps? Or are you going to go to, let's say, Sennheiser, who have been making specifically like audio for like decades? Just because you're doing gaming with your audio doesn't mean that it doesn't still apply that they're perhaps the best solution in terms of what you're looking for an audio solution. And so
for sure.
I think the chairs, that was like an immediate thing I saw coming out. It's like suddenly these companies are like, these are gaming chairs now because we call them gaming chairs. So therefore they're chairs for gaming. And if you're a gamer, you should buy the gaming chair. So, well, what about the companies who've just been, because like you said, because you said it actually, you're like, it's actually just, you're not gaming, you're just actually sitting. So it's what companies have been like thinking about that a lot. And from all this the research and stuff I did on this, I found that there's kind of like this price point you get to where the qualities are really good, really durable, and everything like that.
Yeah.
And then what you pay more money for is how adjustable the chair is. That's kind of actually how Herman Millers tend to be.
Okay.
You can actually get like a Herman Miller chair maybe for like $500 to $600, and that's kind of like the entry cost of like, these are the quality, you're getting those quality components, great materials and so on. But then it's about, okay, which size of chair? Do you want adjustable this, and how adjustable? Do you want the lumbar support? Do you want the headrest support? Do you want the tilt back? And like suddenly that's what their chairs basically become, like extremely adjustable, which just basically goes to show that there is no like one solution.
Yeah, I mean, if they're adjustable, that I bet that definitely that helps, because to give a bit more detail about some of the stuff I was touching on before and why Dan is mentioning about adjustability is because you have to, and going, I guess it ties in with what we were talking about with regards to body types, etc. You have to think about like how far, like the distance between what you sit on to the floor, because that affects the angles in your ankles, knees, hips. The desk with regards to how your arms rest on it. I don't know about Herman Millers, but if you've got a chair and it has an adjustability for like your lumbar, all these things, they can help your back, and like they can adjust not just your back, but those little adjustments are things that you should think about. Whatever chair you have, to try to, if you are getting pain in your body from sitting, all those little things come together. And if those chairs are adjustable and they can help those things, that would be great. For me personally, I'm not too fussy about the chair I sit on. It's all about having something behind my lumbar spine, because that allows me to sit in a relaxed but neutral posture, so that my the muscles on either side of the spine, the spinal erectors, they're relaxed, because you don't want. Sorry, I'm going on all these tangents, but some people say, sit on like what's it called, a Bosu ball, a Swedish ball, the big inflatable ball.
Oh, I've heard this, yeah.
Some people say sit on that because it forces you to sit upright, but that's sort of like misleading, because whilst it means that you're probably going to end up sitting straight, it also means that your spinal erectors are going to get overused. And if they're overused, it means that they can cause pain in your lower back, and they can put too much force on your discs. So for me personally, I don't really mind what chair I sit on, as long as I can put something behind my lumbar spine and I'm thinking about my posture and I'm changing my posture. That's fine by me.
So, one other thing that kind of ties into, let's say, back health and all of this that I've kind of gathered from listening to various people is just like the core, like the focus on core strength. And I think that core strength as an idea is almost like a buzzword to a lot of people, because it kind of encapsulates, it's like this huge umbrella term almost. It encapsulates so many things.
It's also, it can be misleading to people as well, right?
Yeah. So how would you like, what's been your approach to it? Because I actually, as a quick thing, I don't know if you listened to this, but Joe Rogan did this podcast with this, I think he was like a top 8 strongman. I forget what his name was. And he was basically
Probably Eddie Hall.
Maybe he's basically saying how like he's destroyed like.
Oh no, O'Brien, the big American guy, maybe.
Yeah, big American dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was basically describing how he had so many like injuries and herniations, and like he destroyed his back. Robert Oberst. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, and he returned to competition.
Yeah, sorry, dude, I get them mixed up sometimes. He's a giant, mate. That guy's huge, bro.
And he was just basically saying, yeah, man, it's just like core strength. Just like he just changed the way that he did all of his lifting and just focused like just only on the core strength. And he, even though he'd had all these like super severe like herniations and like multiple discs and stuff like that, he was able to go back to being a strong man. And the thing is, like, they do something that is just so outrageous. Like the amounts of weight that they're lifting and just the ways they're doing it is just so unrealistic. So when I heard that, I was like, wow, if this guy can kind of come back from that with the, just good training, that's really, I didn't think that would be possible.
Yeah, well, I think an interesting tangent to this, right, which I'm sure you can understand, and most people that take part in sports or have an idea, or martial arts or physical activity, you realize, or some people might be aware of this anyway, there's a common misconception that athletes and people that are their work is their bodies and fitness are the healthiest. And it's a kind of a misconception, because sure, they're usually the fittest, but often these people are walking around with some of the most annoying injuries, etc. And so, yeah, dude, like a lot of these people are competing in many different sports with lots of pains in their bodies that they have to get around because it's their career, and because their careers cause this. The body's not made to deadlift 300 kilos, regardless of your body type or weight. Sure, you can create the strength to do it, but yeah, eventually over time, doing all these athletic activities, you'll get these things that can hurt and that will cause pain in your body, and you can perform, you can essentially be a superhuman, but you'll be a superhuman with lots of pain in your body. That was a bit of a jumbled point, but yeah, it's interesting to note, right, that these athletes that we look up to, that don't think that they're like impervious to damage. A lot of these people are having pains in their bodies they have to deal with, lots of rehab, prehab, etc.
Yeah.
It's I guess what I'm saying.
There's always a cost, right?
Yeah, there's always a cost. But going back to what you were asking me about, like the approach to like core or what core strength, whatever means to me, is that what you kind of?
Yeah, it just seems like, because all the back rehab stuff that Dr. Brendan Murray, who's the guy that's helping my girlfriend out right now, is all about like just building up core strength so that the muscles that support the spine and the back are able to actually take off all the pressure, basically. So it seems like that's one of the focuses. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, how do I start this point, man? This is we've already started going down the rabbit hole a bit. I guess we're gonna really start to descend down the rabbit hole now. So yeah, if you get like herniated disc in your back, if you start getting pain in your back that's not like necessarily muscle pain, even if it is muscle pain sometimes, but let's just talk very generally. If you're getting pain in your back, your spine, some people might think you need to strengthen your back, which sure can be the case sometimes, or maybe working on things that help assist the back, sort of like the outside muscles or whatever. But again, guys, take anything I say about fitness with a pinch of salt. I never say I'm right or wrong about specific things, but from what I've learned from like very well-respected people in the athletic back rehab industry, especially if it's herniated disc issues, yeah, it's to do with core strength, and I'm saying that with like quotation marks, and core control. And so then, yeah, going to the next bit of, I guess, what Dan's question is looking to address is like, what is core strength? What is core control? On a base level, for me, and from what I've learned, it's to do with the muscles that are closest to the spine and the muscles that help support the spine. And when we say strength, it's not necessarily how much weight can those muscles, like how much weight you can load on those muscles before the muscles fail. It's to do with how well can those muscles support your spine staying in a neutral posture whilst under load. It's about how well you can activate those muscles to help you do strength and athletic movements, strength-based and athletic movements. But then, of course, beyond that, core strength is also to do with being able to do motions with your whole body without, without like risking injury? No, without doing motions with your body without compromising the integrity of like your spine and like optimal movement patterns, if that makes sense. And so I guess that's an answer to like the first part of the question, is how I view core strength and what core strength kind of is with regards to the body.
And I can add something quickly to that as well.
Yeah.
This is something
it's not to do with like if you have a six pack or not. It's not to do with like sucking your stomach in when you do exercise so that your abs look better, etc. It's not to do with sit ups or doing stuff like that. And I guess we'll get onto that. But anyway, let's let Dan interject with his point.
Yeah, so I think a good example, I think also from a shoulder perspective, that I think is something that adds to your point, is that let's say whenever you're doing like an overhead pressing movement, like most people are going to be thinking about your delts, and you're going to be thinking about your triceps, and you're going to be thinking about maybe your core to some extent in terms of just like stabilizing the body as you push the weight overhead.
Say it, Dan. Say it. Scapular retraction. Say it, Dan.
Right. So also, yeah, there's a huge degree of importance behind the muscles that stabilize your through the mechanics of the movement of pushing overhead. And if you don't, even if you have the muscles, like when let's say you're using a machine, right? One of the reasons why actually training on machines kind of sucks dick is because you're actually removing a lot of the stabilizers and their importance. And so something like your scapular control and your rotator cuff muscles when you're pushing weight overhead is extremely important, because what the rotator cuff muscles do is to stabilize the shoulder joint. And so if your joint is not stable, what happens is there's a huge degree of overcompensation from the more dominant muscles. And then what happens there is then there's like this, not only will you lift less, and you'll be lifting less in a more unstable way. So you'll be more prone to injury. So it's about like not only just like having the right movement patterns and mechanics, but also having the right balance of strength in the kind of supportive muscles and everything else. And that's like, I think kind of adding to your point, it's like having like an energy leak when you're doing movements, and then the energy has to lift that, to kind of lift that weight, has to come from somewhere. So it's going to come from other places. And then you're just going to have a really inefficient machine, which is just going to be prone to breaking down, just like a bad engine that's not using its fuel effectively. And I think that's like the same with the core and the back and stuff like that. Like there's so many different kind of synergists and supporting muscles to any movement you're doing, because pretty much everything is like compound at that point. Like everything's involving like a huge amount of different muscles. So, but the thing is like you say, is you can see the abs, right? It's always like this with human beings, I guess. Like if we can see it, we can care about it. But if we don't see it, and we don't have the knowledge to otherwise know that it's there, if it's otherwise invisible, like let's say before people figured out what gravity was, or like germs and developing germ theory, because you couldn't actually physically see them or have the technology to see them, you create the reality based off of what you can see, and even though that's wrong. So yeah, that's why like I was asking about core strength, because it's like it is this really ambiguous term, and I think you helped to shed some light on that.
Yeah, I mean, I slightly missed the mark then when I was talking about scapular retraction, because for me, scapular retraction with shoulders is a good comparison to real core strength versus, I need to do lots of sit-ups. Because with shoulders, right, is that a lot of people think, I've got to strengthen like the muscle heads on my shoulder, as opposed to thinking about how tightly can I lock my shoulder into my rib cage to like protect my shoulder so the muscles can do the best work, and so that my lat is activated, etc. If you get what I mean. But I guess we were kind of on the same wavelength, but I was just looking at one part of it.
Yeah, and for anyone who wants to get nerdy, I always like try to repeat these so I don't forget them. But these are four muscles you've probably never heard of. But the four like rotator cuff muscles are the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the subscapularis. So like obviously like these are the muscles where you like go onto a fitness magazine. It's like, here is how you train your subscapularis. And of course it doesn't exactly work like that. You're supposed to like isolate like all these different types of muscles, but just it's having the awareness, I think, and the knowledge that makes the difference.
It's cool what you said about compound lifts as well, because not that I really ever do these, but even something like if I was doing a bicep curl, I pretty much try to think about every exercise I do these days as a compound movement, right? Like if I'm still focusing on one small bit, like one part of my body, I need to make sure that my core is activated, maybe my glutes are activated. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, with the type of injury that I have to think about those types of things. I've got to think that everything that I'm doing is all connected, even if I'm just focusing on one part. Same when I'm doing martial arts, like I have to think a lot about how I kick, because like I can't twist. My spine does not have a capacity to twist. So everything I do has to be like around the hip. So when I kick, I have to bring up my leg and make sure that my hip and my shoulder are all aligned, and that, like I'm turning from the momentum over my toes, so to speak. Like, I have to think about all of that stuff. And so I think it's cool what you mentioned about the compound lifts, and when you I think your phrase was, I mean, pretty much at that point, everything's compound. That's kind of how I see things, man. With what I do, I have to be thinking about my whole body, even if I'm doing just a focus on one bit. I also, for sure, man, machines, like they're a tricky one. You've got to, if you're using a machine, you've got to be like, for instance, bodybuilders, they're brilliant at using machines because they know they have a purpose for them, right? Like there are some things that they can do with machines to overload their muscles, to get results, to get more muscle growth, and they're geniuses at that. But like the average person, like you have to know why you're using a machine. For me, like for instance, there was one point where like I had an old knee injury back in like 2011 or whatever, and for me, like part of getting good strength and motion back in it was doing just basic what's it called, man, where you just the quad extension or whatever. Like very lightly, just things like that. Like machines, I don't think they like machines have a purpose, but you just have to know what the purpose is and to use them the right way. And so I still use some machines these days, but generally, you like I don't know. You have to know how to approach them. Is what I'm saying.
I have a good comparison for CS people, because I think you're right. Like machines are really appropriate if you're a bodybuilder, specifically knowing what you're doing, or like doing rehab, which is also quite very specific. But it's kind of like just because it's easy doesn't mean that's where beginners should start, because it's not supposed to be easy in that way when you're kind of trying to learn it. It's actually very complicated, and a lot of lifting is quite technical. And so it's like every
bit of lifting is technical, man. I feel like gyms, there should be laws so that really truly qualified people should only be the people working gyms, and that everyone starting a gym membership should have like someone hold their hand for the first hour to show them how to squat, deadlift. Sorry, Dan, I'm interjecting, man. But anyway, getting me like riled up now about all these different things that I've never been able to say publicly, because we're always just talking about video games, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I was just going to say, like, it would be as though you're like, I want to be a great Counter-Strike player, and I'm going to start by only playing gun game. It's like, well, it's just definitely not, it's not the same thing. You can play as much gun game as you want. You can own everyone in gun game, but you're not a Counter-Strike player. You're just a guy who's good at gun game. Even if you're in a server and using a mouse and keyboard and the rest of it. And I think it's the same thing with lifting. And it is interesting too, like this, whilst we're here actually, because you're getting riled up, let's like channel into that a little bit. Because you're
trying to channel into the deep dark corners of Paula.
I have my own like versions of pet peeves. Like I see people doing certain things, and I definitely don't cast any shade on people, because either you either care, or two, you're just or you're uneducated. And it's like it's really like a one of those two things. Either you care enough to know better, or you don't care, and that's fine if you don't care. Or you're someone who's educated and cool, or you're getting educated, whatever it is. I don't really care what people are doing. But when I see people doing stuff like, I think the one that gets me the most is like 50% like range of motion, like pull-ups and stuff like that, where people completely ignore the bottom 20% range and the top 20% range. That's something that kind of, again, if you're a bodybuilder and you're just trying to like, you're going for that bicep hypertrophy, okay, cool, man. You're probably on roids as well. That's, you do you. But if,
not
if
necessarily.
you're not,
It might not be all. Dan, I feel like we're in the deep dark corners of DK right now.
I mean, that's fine. Well, so the one difference there is I'm not like using that as like, oh, these people that use steroids in this kind of a derogatory fashion. It's totally fine if people decide to use steroids.
No, I'm kidding. Dan.
It's totally fine if you decide to use steroids. It's just that the way that you train is completely different because your body has a completely different capacity for recovery. So it actually fundamentally changes the way that you would train if you were using gear or if you're not. So that's the only reason I mentioned that because they're able to do stuff that isn't possible for people that aren't on the gear, which is fine. Again, like if you make that decision, that's cool. But yeah. Anyway, give me a pet peeve.
Dude, it's not. I'm not going to give a pet peeve, but just an anecdote from my life. So
Nice.
it was one of the first times I was going to the gym, or like the first 6 months or something year that I was there. So like such a small amount of time, and I was like, yeah, man, I'm going to start squatting. I need to start doing my legs. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't read anything online, like any good materials. Went to the gym, started squatting. Could instantly feel like the disc in my back was annoyed, like I was doing it all wrong. I had no tension in my upper back. I didn't know how to hold the bar. I didn't know anything like about the weight being on your heel, pushing with your hip, like all this stuff, keeping your chest big and pushing with your bar. All this stuff, dude. Like without getting into details of how to do a proper squat. For anyone out there, by the way, I learned eventually through looking at strong lifts. It's a great beginner's way to learn about lifting, and that guy has great resources on how to do exercises in a pretty good way. Good way. I used to look at Mark Rippetoe stuff as well. Just if before you start doing lifts, find out how to do them properly from trusted sources online. Anyway, so yeah, I remember one time I was squatting, and I was friendly with people at the gym. And someone came over, he's like, nah, man, you're squatting all wrong. And I didn't know what I was doing at the time. So I'm like, yeah, sure, man, show me what to do. So he was like, he gets under the bar. And so if anyone out there listening to this knows how to squat properly, just listen to how fucking ridiculous this is. The guy was like, okay, so what you do, you go down. And then when you get to parallel at the bottom, when you're in the hole, you try to shift the weight onto your toes so that your heels come up. So then you can like slam your heels back down to like push up. And I'm like, yo, I get it, man. This is sick. So I start doing it and I start developing like knee pain. It's worse for my lower back. There's no stability. And like, yeah, dude, like I thought that was normal. Right. And like, this is why I'm saying like, I feel like if you're going to the gym for the first time, find trusted sources on how to do stuff. Start following those. Or in the perfect world, every gym would have properly, like the staff would know how to do all of this stuff perfectly, and they'd teach people. There'd be mandatory teaching at the start, because otherwise, yeah, you can end up hurting yourself. Like I definitely exacerbated my back stuff through poor form in the gym and not knowing when I was doing jiu-jitsu that I can't do specific things. Because for instance, these days, yeah, when I'm fighting, bro, and when I'm training and drilling, there are things that I just can't do anymore. Like I can't do inverted guard or whatever. I can't like throw my leg up and do triangles like sloppily, all this stuff. I can't punch and twist my spine. I have to do everything from the hips. Like it's like, yeah, man, like if someone had told me that stuff earlier on and I wasn't doing ridiculous shit that other people show me in the gym, like trying to squat on my toes, right, then I could slam my heels into the floor. Like maybe I'd be I would have not have aggravated my back so much.
I wonder if that guy was just like performing an epic troll or something.
No, dude, no, man. This guy was serious.
Was he actually huge as well?
Serious,
was he?
Man. Hammersmith.
Oh,
Hammersmith, the gym that's attached to Hammersmith and West London College. It's a gym on next to that. It's funny times, mate. Funny times.
Nice. I was born in Hammersmith. Yeah.
Which hospital?
Actually, you know what? I don't know which hospital. I'd have to double check that, but it's on my passport. So it's official.
Really?
Yeah.
You could, because then you would have been born in either, what's it? The hospital near where I live when I'm in London, where I grew up, which is Charing Cross, or I think it's Queen Mary in Hammersmith. Anyway, why are we talking about Anyway, Dan.
You reminded me. So do you know who Jimmy Smith is? I know that's like a very generic name, but in the MMA, like MMA is the context. He's one of the he's an MMA commentator, and actually he was he was looking at, because he loves like StarCraft actually, and through a friend who knows him quite well, and is I'm a mutual friend of that guy. He's like links me up with him because he wanted to get some insight onto what is how would I start doing talent work in esports, because he was thinking about branching out a little bit from his MMA talent work, and
the likelihood is that I would have heard his voice. Like
probably,
I've been watching UFC since UFC 3 on VHS in the 90s, and I watch pretty much every event. I follow all these people like it's part of my daily, weekly thing. See what's going on in MMA. I'm massively hyped about the fights tomorrow. So I've searched him now. I don't recognize his name, but shout out to Jimmy. I've probably heard your voice, mate. Anyway, Dan, continue.
Yeah, so I got into a conversation with him eventually about just like starting up martial arts again and BJJ, and I was saying, but I'm a little bit worried because I've got these injuries and everything, and
you should be, Dan. You should be fucking terrified. No kidding.
and he was like, he's just saying to me, he's like, hey man, it just goes to a good club. Like, but the reality is that we're all of us are injured, and when you're about to roll with someone, you're just like, yeah, this is the thing that I have that's fucked up. What have you got? And basically, like, it kind of goes back to the point you were talking about before about how a lot of athletes, again, it kind of comes at a cost. And he told me that he just like has sciatica like all the time. He's like, I got it right now. And I was just like, whoa.
Oh, mate.
Yeah. And, I've met so many people that have had these injuries, and it's really interesting how people carry them and how they deal with them and how they choose to pursue their passions despite them. And so that's one of the reasons actually why I was asking you about it and kind of your journey back into everything, because I think that's really amazing. Like, actually, one thing that I've been able to do recently that I haven't been able to do for 10 years is actually back squat, because my shoulder rotated cuff, my external rotation was just like really messed up, and I have like a asymmetric shoulders in terms of the mobility, and so
same.
This is something that's
one is like crusty, and then the other one is like fresh.
Yeah. So this is something that I went to see this guy, Dr. Brendan Myrie, and he just kind of like he opened up the range quite a lot on both of my shoulders and got me back squatting, and we also found out that like I have kind of like weird anatomy, like long femurs. Like,
could you not do the back squat because when you were trying to get tension in your upper back when you're gripping the bar, was it just like too painful on your shoulder? You just couldn't get it in that position, or what?
Yeah, but basically, yeah. I basically just couldn't get my shoulders in a position where I could like hold on to the bar.
Do you do like high bar or like low bar?
I've been doing mostly high bar.
Yeah, I was going to say that must require less flexibility on the shoulder, right?
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing too is that I was kind of, my squatting mechanics were quite poor, and it's in part because of compensating for various things, and also like I've looked at so much shit on the internet and like studied so much about these things and mechanics that I'd also like kind of confused myself with too much information. And so like he basically just said to me, hey, just try to just show me like you just jumping, like just to try to jump as high as you can. And so I just like did like this explosive like jump, and he said, okay,
explosive Dan jumps through the ceiling.
and so then he's like, okay, you see what you just did?
Wow, you've got a great vertical, Dan.
When you like squatted down, that's how you squat. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, that's how you squat. And because I've studied like, okay, if you have this kind of anatomy, this is like the different angles you're going to be at, and this is like the load that's going to be on your back based off, you've got like this much dorsiflexion and your femurs are like this length, and that's going to affect the load on your back and all this shit. And so whenever I was squatting in the past, like I would feel like it was like a back exercise a lot of the time. Like I'd always feel like too much soreness in my back, and it'd be a limitation on how much, I would force I would be able to actually get through my legs. So yeah, and then he just like helped me to fix my back squat. So that's pretty amazing. So now I'm back squatting again. So I'm loving that.
Good, man.
Yeah,
like, dude, being able to do those things again, it's a very freeing feeling. It's kind of like you get, I don't want to call them demons, but for the sake of discussion poetry, you kind of feel like you beat some demons. Like, yeah, man, I can do that again. Because I remember that's what it was like for me. So, for instance, my girlfriend, she's a personal trainer as well as a teacher. Like a secondary school teacher. And so when we started dating, we were going to the gym a lot together. We still go, but that was what I'm talking about is that when we were initially dating, those were like some of the first times where I was like, okay, I'm going to regularly start going to the gym again. And then I built up over time. And then, yeah, eventually I was like, man, I feel like I can, if I'm on a good day, I can do a 100-kilo deadlift again. And like, that was, dude, if you asked me that in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, even 2017, that would have felt like, come on, Parla, man, like, be realistic. And yeah, dude, I managed to do it. And it's like, you do that and you're like you feel like you've achieved something that you didn't think was going to be possible for you again, and you've done it safely. And it's like, I'm sure that's probably how it felt for you with being able to do things with your shoulder after starting to improve it, right?
Oh my God, yeah. Right now I feel like I can go so much further with my physical training than I could ever have imagined I would be able to, like, because you just learn to live with like these limitations. And especially like if it's something like a back or a shoulder or both or whatever it is, or it affects so many other things. It's not just like, oh, I have a dodgy back so I can't deadlift. No, it's fucking everything. It's actually just everything.
Yeah.
And it's the same with your shoulders pretty much. It's like almost everything is impacted by this, so you have to find ways to work around it and do so sensibly.
This is a video that we need to do for my channel, man. Paula and Dan in the gym. I know we did that piece of content for PGL at the major, right, in Krakow.
Oh,
remember but I want to do a real one for my channel, like a full-on like 10-minute me and you cracking jokes and working out, having fun, and I don't know, like we can mix CS into it maybe or something. But yeah, dude, we should do this, man. Now that we're working out properly again and getting healthier or whatever.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, dude, like, I remember that for me, man. And especially with the martial arts as well, I guess, because even though it was a passage of time, many different things that caused the herniation in my back, but because the major traumatic relapse that happened in 2012 was during jiu-jitsu, the first time that I went back to jiu-jitsu, it's on my Instagram, I did a post, and that was before I started doing it regularly again. I was like, oh man, I feel rusty, but my back feels okay. And then, yeah, scroll on like a year and a half, start 2019, and I started, okay, let me start trying to do martial arts regularly again. And I started doing it. And don't get me wrong, dude, it's not like I go to training, I come home and I feel great. It's like, dude, I still get like little bits of pain in my body and stuff. But if I train smartly, yeah, like, dude, I can do this. And if I give myself the proper rest, I'm not aggravating my injuries. And I remember, yeah, over 2019, realizing, dude, I can do this again. Like, I'm wrestling with people, I'm like punching and kicking and like moving around, and it was like, oh dude, it was exponentially even more enjoyable than when I was at university and doing it, or when I was a kid. And you feel like you've beat this thing that had a big bit of control over you. Don't get me wrong, I guess technically I've always said this, that technically hurting my back was what led me to the career I have today. And so there's always that positive side of it. But the negative side of it stopped me doing lots of things I was passionate about. And then when you get rid of that bit and you're like, I'm doing those things again, it's like, oh, it felt so good, dude. And it still feels good. Even on a day like today where I've gone to training and I went for a double leg on someone and I got stuffed. I end up on my back and they start wrecking me. And you feel beat up afterwards, whatever. And you come home. There's still that part of you where I'm like, man, I'm still doing this. I'm good. Like, I'm feeling good. It's like, it's such a positive feeling. I'm sure that's what you have with your shoulder as well.
Yeah. I think so. I think that was actually something that I forget, like when we had that conversation, but that in that sense, I think, if you guys listening, Paula and I have quite similar origin stories insofar as when I got my injury and it took away a huge part of my life and a huge and fitness was also like a massively huge coping mechanism for me. I started producing content on YouTube.
I love that phraseology, Dan.
What's that?
Origin story.
Origin story, yeah, man.
I'm surely you can only use the phrase origin stories in like a video game or a movie, you know?
But yeah, man, it applies, I reckon, because that was like the birth of who we are in this. In the space that we're in now and the platform that we've created for ourselves, it came out of that kind of pain and depression. And because I don't know about you in terms of depression, but I definitely like sunk into kind of a depression and the productivity of like doing YouTube stuff and trying to give value by understanding, okay, what is it that I have that I can get out there into the world that's going to not only just like help people, but help me to kind of even go further with the obsessions and passions that I have. Like this, that kind of mentality, I think, that's what definitely saved me. And if I hadn't started producing content, there's no way I'd be where I am right now in the way that I'm doing it, at least. So
Yeah, for me, 2012, when unemployed, finished university, couldn't do my hobby because of my back. I didn't have depression then. I was upset and I was frustrated and I didn't know what was going to happen next. But definitely then when I started making videos before I got employed, I realized instantly, yo, this is what I want to do. And it like through my childhood, through my teens, through university, I didn't ever know what I wanted to do. And I ended up hurting my back, and this idea of YouTube popped back into my head, creating content. And when I started doing it, instantly I knew, yo, if I can make a career out of this, that would be the dream. And I don't know, like I had a big I still have, but I mean at the time specifically, I just suddenly had this big motivation. You feel like you have got something that plugs that gap. So whilst I wasn't depressed at that time, it's like it got rid of a lot of that feeling of, okay, what happens next? Then I had in my head, I was like, okay, I don't know what happens next, but I know, okay, I need to get a job. I need to keep making these videos and keep going in that direction. And it was a very fulfilling feeling of okay, I've got something, I've got a plan now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. There was actually a moment I had, which I think is quite similar, where I started doing it, and then and after like doing it, I was like, obviously no one's really watching your stuff or whatever, but I just had this like realization where I was like so excited about the whole process, even though I had like less than 50 views on a video, and I had like one or two people commenting.
Dan, your apartment's not burning down or anything.
Oh no,
right
no,
now.
it's we have extremely sensitive fire alarms.
Okay.
but I had this feeling where I was just like, wow, my mind started racing, and I'm obsessed with this process. Like this just feels right. Like this, I just want this. Just doesn't. Nothing else feels as exciting as this does right now. And I immediately could see into the future and to see because I knew I was just going to keep pumping out this stuff. I would just keep doing it, and I couldn't see any reason why I wouldn't just keep doing it. It seemed like the only thing that mattered or that was important at that point. So, it saved me in that way.
Yeah, I can definitely say it, at least in part, that's how it was for me. Obviously, I ended up taking a break from doing my own content, but coming back to it over the last like 6 months or so, 7 months, especially over the last couple of months where I've ramped things up again, that's the feeling I have again now of like, dude, it's just good to be making stuff and enjoying it. And yeah, going back to 2012, as soon as I started making those videos, I was like, dude, this is it, man. This is what I want to do. And then, it became a full-time job. I started doing the presenting stuff as well. And it just turned out that way, right? I don't know if it was to do with if it was all to do with planning or a bit of luck or fate or whatever. But yeah, to anybody watching, if there's something out there that you want to do, like, and you have a feeling like it could be something good for you, then go out there and do it. Like, don't get me wrong, I did end up doing it, but imagine if I'd started in 2006, 2007. Like it could have gone a different way. It could have gone even better. So if there is something that you want to do, don't hold it off like I did and wait for your back to snap. Just start doing it. Start doing it, man. Just go and if you have a potential passion for something, try it out. You have nothing to lose.
And okay, so we talked about like that, with the body and so on. There can be like a cost, and the mind is the same way in many respects. There are certain things that can be quite stressful or costly in terms of our mental health. And so obviously, although producing content through YouTube for you, like for me, was very much a savior when we lost that fulfilling activity and we were in that dark place, and it kind of brought us out of it. Also, there's a lot of pressures and there's a lot of pitfalls as a content creator, psychologically speaking. And obviously, you kind of had you definitely stopped doing content, I think, partly for some of those reasons, right?
I definitely stopped.
So what was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, to put this into context, guys, if you want to see like the full story, which is like 45 minutes, I have a video explaining that. But if you want like a more succinct explanation of it, trying to give you the bullet points. So like Dan said, right, like I explained a bit, when early on, I realized doing this stuff, I wanted to make it a career. By 2015, by like the few months into 2015, middle of 2015, it had become a full-time career. It was earning enough money that I could sustain myself. And then I started doing the presenting stuff as well in CSGO, in like gaming and esports. Shout out to all our CSGO friends out there. And yeah, 2015, 16, like 17, like these years were sick. They were awesome. Like looking back on them, I had so much fun and had a lot of personal growth. However, like at the same time, it was stressful. It was reasons, but the main one for me was I was trying to upload 5 to 7 times a week on YouTube. And oftentimes I was traveling like 2 weeks plus a month. And I was doing all of this stuff on YouTube on my own. For periods, I was trying to stream on Twitch too. So like, it felt like I had very little to no free time. And so whilst I was enjoying everything, the YouTube side of things was getting very stressful. Streaming on Twitch was the first thing that I stopped doing because I just had no time for it. And yeah, like just it built up over time. And things on YouTube with regards to like algorithm changes and like the 10-minute video format, which now like I don't mind at all. But at the time it was a big change, having to make sure that your videos to be optimal in the algorithm need to be over 10 minutes, etc. All these things. And it was taking a toll on me. Like I realized it myself, and people were telling it, like people close to me, my friends, my mum, like you just take a break or whatever. But the problem with YouTube is that it's like a treadmill. Now, it's with streaming as well, all these types of content creation places, to an extent, it's a treadmill. Once you step off it, like you stop getting momentum. And so you have this deep fear of taking a break. But for me, it was like around middle of 2017, like I was really feeling the effects of myself, where I was really beginning to don't get me wrong, I was still enjoying doing it, but oftentimes I wasn't. And the whole point of why I started this, why I had that initial urge to do it, was because I wanted to do it as a passion, as creativity, and to express myself, and because I enjoyed it. And so when the negative feeling of creating my own stuff on YouTube, etc., started to take over, and on the other hand, I was still enjoying the presenting and the CSGO and traveling and doing that sort of thing, I started to weigh it up in my head. I'm like, why am I still doing this if the whole point was to be able to have a career that I enjoyed? And sure, it's still money, but if it's coming at a personal cost, like a mental cost, like Dan was saying, why am I still doing it? I should at least take a break or like go cold turkey. Anyway, so going through 2017, and yeah, just gradually, like that year exponentially, that feeling grew. And then, Dan, you're going to like this, because at the end of 2017, there was, in my eyes, a legendary historic event right at the end of the year. It was Face It's, I can't remember which season it was, but Face It Finals. And for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, but it's a great reason, in my opinion, that you guys decide to have your finals in the Hard Rock Hotel in Cancun, on the beach, all inclusive. Like, this is like the dream event as talent, maybe as a player as well, big prize pool. And we got booked for that and excited to go. But the main thing in my head was like, oh, mate, I don't have enough videos ready for this week and the week I'm going to be away. Oh, and I was so stressed. I was like, oh, my God. Like, and then suddenly there was that switch went in my head where I was like, this shouldn't be the main thought that you have right now. Your main thought should be, this event is going to be awesome. You're going to have a great time with a bunch of friends. And when I realized that I don't know if this makes sense, but when that coin had completely flipped, when that balance had completely gone out, I was like, okay, I need to stop making YouTube videos because this doesn't make any sense. And at the time, it was stopping making YouTube videos in terms of, okay, that's it. Maybe you'll go back at some point if you feel excited to do it, but you can't say, oh, I'm going to take a break for a month, 2 months, whatever, 6 months. Like, you have to just like cut it off and not make it dramatic in terms of leaving a video or anything online saying, guys, I'm taking a break. Just leave it. And then if you ever feel like you want to come back to it. And so then, yeah, I went off to that event and I had an awesome time. But yeah, that was the point where I realized I need to stop making my own content because it was causing more pain than it was causing positivity, Dan.
And it's great though that you had the ability to do to supplement your income by doing talent work, and then you could actually grow that so that that could become the main thing, so you could have that break. And I think that I do wonder, because you touched on the idea of just like losing momentum and how big of a deal it is. And for people who make their livelihood from it, it's like
it's constantly
It's-
uphill. Even if you're one of the biggest in the world, I feel like, don't get me wrong, I don't know what the lifestyle of, let's say, Ninja, Summit, Tim the Tatman, YouTubers like PewDiePie, etc. But PewDiePie is a good example, right? He took a break recently. If you go back a couple of years, he took a break and uploaded a video talking about how stressed he was, and he has a whole team working with him on things. And he's literally the number one in the world. Like, dude, I feel like at any point it can be uphill, and you need to find a way to do it that you don't always feel that, because if you do, eventually, like, you're going to get burnt out. I feel like it's unavoidable unless you can find a way to do it in a sustainable way without like losing too much of yourself in it. And yeah, for me, I felt like I was losing too much of my physical and mental health. Yeah, like for instance, that it was like 2017, 16 where I started getting little feelings of depression and struggling with things that I wouldn't usually. And for me, it was to do with feeling like I constantly had to create things, and I wasn't enjoying it as much, and feeling like I was being forced to do it. And yeah, dude, I think that's what you were getting onto, right? Is that it's hard, man. Sometimes people don't realize. Don't get me wrong, you make the dream come true, like some of us have managed to do, which is amazing. But then when you're living that dream, so to speak, it becomes a reality. And fact is, reality has positives and negatives. And sometimes, like, those negatives can outweigh the positives, and then you have to reassess.
There definitely seems to be this element of, or this idea of control to a degree, whereby, you know, you're like the greyhounds at the race, and you're never going to catch the rabbit, right? That's the whole point. You're never going to catch it. YouTube, you know, it's the algorithm. That's what the rabbit is in this analogy, and you're never going to catch it, but you're always having to chase it, and you don't really have a choice. And it's one of those things where it's I think really difficult for people to be in an environment where you feel like you don't have the control of enough pieces to feel like you're not constantly just chasing after everything else, and that can be pretty dangerous, I think. There's this idea of in psychology of like the illusion of control, which I had a guy who's Team Liquid's sports psychologist on my podcast recently. He was talking about this, and you know, we tend to, you know, it kind of goes into what I was talking about before. Like sometimes, you know, we just have to make our own realities, in the sense that we only have so much information, even because we kind of have to act, right? We have to like figure it out based on the stuff that we have. But sometimes, you know, you might make bad decisions in how you handle things, and you may create like an illusion of control in situations where you don't have control, which then makes you have like this expectation tied to something that you think you control when you actually don't. And so when shit, you know, hits the fan, which inevitably will in that case, you'll be in a really bad state because you feel this personal responsibility because you felt like you had control, but you really didn't. So like the ability to just like accept that and go with the flow, man, and all that kind of stuff is actually quite difficult, especially when it pertains to your livelihoods.
It's very difficult. And for me, like to put this into context with myself, it's like eventually, if I think it was like coming over the end of 2018, start of 2019. So it was like, like 2012 onwards, every single day, like every hour, probably 60% or more of my thoughts were to do with content creation on YouTube. What can I make? How can I be optimal in the algorithm whilst retaining my uniqueness and creative control? And like, yeah, eventually became like that grows into that's like an obsessive behavior, right? And so then I took my break at the end of 2017, but at the time I was saying, I'm just done. If I never do it again, fine, I can be happy with what I've done. But dude, it took from that day, I remember it was like middle of 2018, I think, where I was like, well, wait a second, I didn't think about like YouTube stuff today. It took like until I had a day where I just didn't think about that stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm making progress now. And then like about 6 months later, maybe end of 2018, start of 2019, I started having the creative urges again, where I'm like, dude, I want to do this again. And so then you start thinking, okay, how am I going to do this now? But make sure that you're just sticking on the positive side. Don't get me wrong, there will still be negatives to things, but how can I do this and make it an overall positive gain? And so me coming back to it, don't get me wrong, I still want to grow things again. I still want to, but become optimal in the algorithm and have that side of things going. But the main reason why I came back to making my own stuff is just because I had that creative urge. I had that 2012, that 2006-07 feeling of, I want to do this again. I miss doing it. And of course, I'm still doing my presenting stuff. I never got burnt out from that. It was like, I can make my stuff again and find a way to schedule it in a way that I'm going to enjoy it. And that's the main reason, to come back to do it and enjoy it. And yeah, of course, want to grow things again. But the whole point coming back to it now is to not be under that illusion of control, is to accept, some things might be out of your control, and that's okay. And just to go with it and to do it because I enjoy it, and to enjoy every time I'm doing it, so to speak. I think what you said about the illusion of control is cool. It's interesting. I've not heard of the concept, but I would imagine that the resultant way you should act from a discussion about illusion of control is that understanding that, yes, sometimes things are just out of your control, and that's okay, and learning how to function around that concept. Am I accurate there at all, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's one of those things where the problem with it is that it appears without people. You don't wake up one day and decide I'm going to believe I have control over this. It's just an illusion that you just create, and it's not having an awareness that you are trying to control something that you truly actually can't, and not accepting that that's the case, and not then as you're saying, like, just understanding then what can I control? What are the mitigating elements? What are the ways that I can kind of deal with this chaotic world or whatever it is that you're dealing with? But do you have a creative process? Like, because I know that that term gets used quite a lot with creatives, and obviously what you do is really creative. You have your own specific style, and maybe you have creative urges, but you don't have a direction to them, or what is that? Do you have a process for creatively speaking?
I don't know. It depends, right? What you mean by creative process? Because for me, so like I remember just before I was taking the break. Like, for instance, I felt like I had to make 5 to 7 videos a week. And I like to have a good balance of content. And so my creative process was, what can I do to fulfill the balance of content that I want to put out? And in terms of which games, what real life, comedy, whatever stuff. These days, because I'm not putting that strain on myself, I have to make X amount of videos. I recently committed to like 1 video a week, because I know that that's 100% possible. And like the last week or a couple weeks or a few weeks, I've done a bit more than that, because I just felt like I can do that. But I don't know if I don't know if it's a creative process, but it's like, what do I want to make today? How am I going to make it? What's going to be the theme? Like, how am I going to record it? What kind of do I need to do to, like, physically for the video? Coming up with the concept, maybe I have like a creative process. But for me, with regards to editing, like recently I did a video at Blast, right? Where I went around with Tom, my friend, who I think camera guy, director.
Yep.
And had a basic concept of what we wanted to record, but I didn't know how I was going to edit it until I started editing it. That's often the case, is that you start creating everything for real when you start editing it. And my creative process when editing is dependent on what kind of video it is or what direction I think it's going in. So I don't know. I guess I have a bit of I have a creative process, but it's not like a strict one. My creative process maybe is a bit unpredictable. Like recently I've been doing these Road to Global videos, and they started off with just the gameplay and my face cam and stuff. And then I started adding some funnier bits and editing, and it's a tough question for me when you ask me if I have a creative process, because I guess of course I do, but I'm not entirely sure how to describe it. Or maybe it's hot. Maybe it's not something that I can describe. No,
I think that's totally fair, and I think that part of it is, for a lot of people, is that they will have routines. They'll have they'll it might be that they wake up at the same time every day, go to the gym, then after sit down with a coffee, and then they have like this 30 minutes on their balcony or something, and that's when they're just like,
I do that. I sit and I think about what I want to do, and I guess that's part of what it was, is that before I took that break, I realized I was forcing myself to be creative Whereas now I try to let it come to myself because I'm not putting so much time. I'm not putting so many time constraints on myself, if that makes sense.
And it may be the case too that, you know, in the for the long duration of you trying to kind of force the creativity, that you probably created kind of a lot of different mechanisms in the way that you think about, you know, the kinds of content that you create and that subject material, and you're just like seeing things, like your brain just kind of knows what to pick up by just like looking at it.
Dude, subconsciously you build a lot of things. Like,
Yeah.
I promise you, I'm not making this up. Like these days, when I make a video, throughout editing it, when I start getting to like the 8.5 minute mark of the video, like I know that there's enough content to get it to like a nice 10-minute segment, 11, 12-minute segment. And I'm not doing that consciously. Like just the way I'm editing it, it just ends up that way. And so, yeah, like that's just subconsciously like printed into my brain so that just subconsciously when I'm editing, like I don't know how, but just when I'm editing things together, that they just end up the right length. And that's not because pre-plan. I'm like, that's not because I'm like storyboarding my videos, thinking like, oh yeah, like this is how this is going to be 30 seconds or a minute. It just naturally starts happening. If that kind of relates to what you're saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really interesting in that sense because, you know, the longer you do something, I mean, this is why like it's really important to like, this is why experience is a big deal. It's not just that, you know, you can say, oh, this guy's really experienced. He's got 10 years doing this job. And this person's really smart, but they don't have the experience. They've only got 1 year doing this job. And the person's got 10 years. It's about that like intuition, because you're taking in all this data all the time. Imagine let's say if you're like a physical therapist, for example, and you've had the same training as all of the other ones. If you've been at the job for longer, you have seen more people. And so there's going to be like small little things that your brain's going to pick up that maybe when you're actually, you know, going and working on these people, like it's not a big deal. It's not pertinent for you to even think about that much. But then there's that one person where your brain just leaps to the right conclusion because it knows, it puts all these pieces together, which you can't consciously, but you subconsciously you can. And so that's like that expert intuition that develops over time. And I imagine that's what you have going on. It's like, why is it that, you know,
I would imagine so. I would imagine that there's a level of intuition you get just from doing it many times, because the amount of hours that I've spent on content creation, if you're talking about theorizing to filming it to editing it to like releasing, and then along with the presenting stuff, oh dude, it's going to be way over 10,000 hours, which is like a mark that some people use for things. It's going to be many hours. It's like yeah.
It's like there's this great book, and I reference it all the time. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who's a guy that won a Nobel Prize for this book actually, and this work on statistical intuition and various other things. And he in this book kind of describes how he thinks the brain works in terms of intuition and how you think, like what you're thinking actually, how he breaks it down, how it works. And in his idea, there's like this idea that you have this system 1 and system 2 in your brain, which is basically like the subconscious and conscious brain. And so you have this one area which is, I always mix them up. Let's just use your subconscious, right? So if you look at like 2 plus 2, like you know that's 4. Like that doesn't, you know, if someone asks you what is the capital of you know, France, you know that's Paris. Like you don't have to like look anything up. You don't have to think about anything. You don't have to calculate anything. You just know this answer automatically. There's no decision being made. And there's that kind of fundamental difference in the brain, like you know, you just know something. And that's so like when you're in a game of Counter-Strike, game sense is the idea that you have so much information in the round, and there's about 20 different decisions you could make, but you immediately, instantaneously, without thinking, discard all the 19 options, and you know that there's this one option. I'm going to look here, and then lo and behold, the guy appears, and you shoot him in the face, and it's like, it's just your brain's taking in all this shit all the time, and so yeah, you have to have a feel for it. So that's really cool. I do wonder. Do you have any ways you've thought that you want to do something new with your content, or like to like a different direction, or like, you know, you could see, for example, you know, Sadicus has gone really, you know, heavily into like all the racing content after, he has that passion. And are there any hidden passions of Parla that haven't come out in your content that we've yet to see?
No, honestly, not really, dude. Like, I would like to. I've always toyed with the idea of starting my own podcast. It's just about doing it the right way. So that's not to do with like, oh, I don't think I can do this, like some hidden passion. I'd also like to. I also get to do a lot of things with production companies, like, for instance, you guys, Face It, and other people, DreamHack, Starladder, PGL, like all ESL, all these different people that I've done stuff with. I get to do a lot of the things I've always wanted to do. I'd like to do, of course, continue doing that stuff. Podcast. If you're talking about doing stuff on my own channel. No, there's nothing really that I've like. This is the thing, right? So when I started making stuff, it was always about doing the stuff I wanted to see. And so I ended up having a focus on CS because CS is like my main esport. Like I love CS. It's part of my life, right? But then at the same time, I've always been playing other games, doing comedy skits and like talk vlogs, whatever. And I've always said to myself, I should be doing the different things that I want. I've never really missed doing a thing because I was like, not necessarily too afraid or because I didn't think it fit or whatever. I've always produced the stuff I've wanted to produce. I intend to keep doing that. And that's part of what I've been doing when I come back, making a range of different things. Like, yeah, I've been doing my CS videos. I've done some real life stuff, played some Tarkov with Henry. I played some random game with Mojo. I uploaded a horror video. And so, no, there isn't like some hidden thing that I've not wanted to do because I always try to do the things that I want to do. And so, yeah, I don't think that there is something that would fit into that. There are more things I want to do, but they're things that I've done or things that I've done similar things to. I'd like to do a bit more acting stuff maybe with other people. But no, dude, I generally do the things that I want to do. Like I try to make sure I do that because otherwise I'm not satisfied. And especially coming back to things now, like I want to make sure that I'm fulfilling myself by doing this stuff again. Okay,
well, I think that's amazing to hear. I think I love the fact that you're kind of driven in that way. That's just really, really good to hear. And I think it's just like very awesome hearing about how positive your journey has been through the ups and downs that you've had and where you've kind of like, you've gone from strength to strength effectively, ultimately speaking. But I think one kind of last question I have to kind of begin to kind of wrap things up here as we're about to hit 90 minutes is how do you feel about your like managing your social media? Is that something that's challenging for you or difficult? Is it kind of to some extent work? Because I know that your character and your personality that's from your YouTube and so on is consistent through a lot of your social media, and you have like quite a sizable following, and you've done really well to grow it and so on. Is it easy or is it difficult, or how do you look at your social media?
So I don't know if it's hard, but again, if we're talking about doing things optimally, like generally it's good to have a presence on different parts of social media, right? And so you have to make an effort to, post on Twitter, post on Instagram, post on YouTube, fire up your stream. I don't know if it's hard, but it's like a commitment that you have to be aware of and that you've got to like stick to, right? And so, yeah, it can be hard when you have a commitment where sometimes you don't always want to do it. Like that's, I guess, me referencing the past. Whereas now it's like, I guess that's different because, yeah, I'm really enjoying uploading and posting everywhere and stuff. I guess I always have, but there was that period where on YouTube I need to take the break. But no, I don't think generally it's not hard, but it can be hard. But you have to be aware that it's a commitment and sometimes you don't always want to do it. Whilst that might not be difficult or painful, it's just realizing that you have a commitment to it and it's part of your work. Luckily for me, like I like to do those things, right? And coming back to posting on YouTube, I like to do it. Posting on Twitter and Instagram, I've always liked to do it. I've never got burnt out from that. Like I like to share jokes and stuff. It's just something that I like to do, or talking with other people. But yeah, at the same time, of course, yeah, sometimes you have to, like, you realize that those are things that you're committed to because it's part of what you do. And so, yeah, whilst I enjoy everything that I'm doing, managing your social media, it can be frustrating. A lot of people don't realize, not frustrating or what's the word, man? Realizing, I keep going back to the word commitment. It's just something that you have to do. And a lot of people that maybe that this isn't their career, it might not be apparent that those parts of it are part of the work, regardless of whether you enjoy it or not. Do you know what I mean? And so,
yeah, I think a lot of us are quite introverted by nature. So it's just like sharing your entire life on Instagram, and like making sure that you always have like pictures and you're adhering to the algorithm, I think can be quite challenging for some. And some people get kind of actually too locked into the I must get all the likes and this didn't get enough likes and I'm feeling bad now. And
yeah, I mean, so for me personally, I'm not like an introverted person. I've always been social and like enjoy doing things with other people. Like when I was at school, I was like the kid in class that like made jokes or whatever. But yeah, like I'm also not someone to like overshare online. I definitely, when I'm online, like I'm being myself. I'm never like pretending to be like a character unless I'm acting in something, right? But in general, like if you see the type of stuff that I put on Twitter or Instagram or on my YouTube, like that's me, dude. Like that's 100% me. But yeah, I'm not the type of person that feels they have to like share too much or do this, that, and the other. But at the same time, yeah, I know that like this is a day where I should probably put something on Instagram, on YouTube, or Twitter, or whatever. I can't. Once you get into this stuff, you can't just like leave them to be themselves and just do it whenever you want. I'm sure some people can get away with that, but I think most people that are doing this sort of stuff as a career, even if you enjoy it, you realize you have a commitment to having to do it with a certain level of regularity or style of content, etc. I hope that answers your question, but it's not something that. It is something that you can struggle with at times and can feel the weight of it. But if you do it the right way, then you can enjoy it and still feel like you have your integrity, which is how I approach, and definitely how I've been trying to approach everything coming round to starting to upload again since I started uploading again on YouTube.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I think what's really cool is specifically the like get from you and your content and stuff and just like the consistency across the platforms is like you have such a I don't want to use the word unique. It is unique, but I want to use a cooler word than that because you would just say, you have this unique thing. But you have your own style that you came up with. See, there I gave you more credit and agency with that phrase. You have your own style that you came up with in terms of how you do your like humor and everything, and I think that's like a large part of how you have garnered such an audience and how why they love you so much and your content so much. Because I think you did one of those things that only some creators are able to do, where they're able to basically almost create their own little niche, and you didn't know that you needed it until you got given it. And that's a great quality that I think is something that I see in some of the leaders of the culture, if you will, such as the people that the first people that started doing YouTube cuts as they're known, or the style that that PewDiePie popularized with the way that he makes his videos and stuff like that. So that's really cool, man. And I'm glad that like it's like hitting full swing for you again in the way that works for you.
Yeah, like full circle kind of how it's come for me.
Are there any sort of final kind of parting pieces of advice or things that you want to say or want to talk about before we close the podcast down?
Well, firstly, Dan, thank you for those kind words. I try not to like analyze myself too much, but it's nice to hear things like that said from someone like yourself that I respect and that I also know is knowledgeable with regards to these types of things. Like when I started this stuff, it was just an idea that me and my friends had toyed with when we were teenagers, and I'd got around to doing it because of the injury on my back or whatever circumstance at the time, and I quickly realized it's what I wanted to do as a career. Then yeah, like from that start, I just tried to put myself out there as me and showing my interests and my sense of humor or whatever, just me as a person, and managed to make it work. And it is it's awesome to know that people have enjoyed you sort of showing just parts of yourself and what you've created for them to enjoy, and things that you've created for yourself to enjoy as well. And so, yeah, big shout out to everybody out there that's supported me along the way, that continues to support me in doing my own content and doing the presenting I do in CSGO and esports and gaming, entertainment, whatever. And yeah, Dan, thanks for having me on. To anybody out there, yeah, if you have a passion that you want to try, just give it a go, especially if you're young. Like, just go for it. But any age, do it feasibly around the schedule and commitment that you have in your life, and give it a go, because at least then you can try and see if you enjoyed it. And if you enjoy it, then maybe you can put in the work, the right steps, and make it into whatever that you want. And I guess that's something that I always try and tell people, and I feel like that's a good way to end things here. And yeah, of course, guys, look after your back and your body. Make sure you're sitting in the right way. Make sure you're protecting your back. All right, guys. And Dan, I guess that's about it.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much. This is a lot of fun, and I can't wait to like chat more together.
Yeah, have me back, Dan. I'm down to chat anytime you want, mate.
Yeah, for sure, dude. There's so many different topics we can go into. We went pretty heavy into the fitness angles today, which I love because I don't ever get to really talk about that stuff on my podcast. So
yeah, dude, man, we barely even touched the surface, bro.
I agree. All right, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dan. Peace, everybody.